Hi. Well, for the fourth section, I kind of wanted to pause for a second and get back to the regular book, the book that's taught in our crappy common, um, how did you put it, communist education institution? I can't remember. But you know what? The book that I was reading, A People's History of the United States, is thick about individuals throughout time, Columbus till present. And but this book does not necessarily have nothing to say. It has donated. The entirety of Howard Zinn's book would be equivocated to this book's from page 308 to page 313. Let's stick it in front of the camera. Anyway, and here it does talk about employment of children, industrial accidents. It gives that much to employment of children, that much to industrial accidents. The strikes of 1877, it gives it a nice paragraph and a breeze over the Knights of Labor, the Haymarket riots, the Pullman strike, just some basics here. But anyway, I wanted to read this part on organized labor, immigrants, blacks, and labor movement. Organized labor also excluded most immigrant and black workers. Some trade unions welcomed skilled immigrants. In fact, foreign-born craftsmen were prominent leaders of several unions, but only the Knights of Labor and the firm policies of accepting immigrants and blacks. A few AFL unions included blacks, but the vast majority had exclusion policies. I don't know why I wanted to read that exactly. Oh, right here. Exclusion policy. A few AFL unions included blacks, but the vast majority had exclusion policies. Resentments already fueled by long-held prejudice increase when blacks and immigrant workers worked as strike breakers. Okay, that's your kind of peeps, your kind of people, the strike breakers. It is likely that a few strike breakers understood the full effects of such employment when they were recruited to fuel the jobs as striking workers. But even those who did, the lure of employment was too great to resist, meaning you had the strikers, the unions, and then you had those that were in need, and you know what? The owner said, hey, we'll take you on. So they walked in and they broke the strikes because, like you said, hey, you know, like the Ayn Randian ideal, the person running the company, the capitalist, the employer. This is very interesting. Now, they allow the other people to come in and break the strike by simply taking the jobs and firing the other people. For most American workers then, the machine age had mixed results. Industrial wages rose between 1877 and 1914, boosting purchasing power and enabling the creation of mass market for standardized goods. Yet in 1900, most employees worked 60 hours a week at wages that averaged 20 cents an hour for skilled work and 10 cents an hour for unskilled work. Granted, you could buy a loaf of bread for 5, so 20, you could buy 4 loaves of bread for an hour's worth of work. Moreover, as wages rose, living costs increased even faster. The industrial transformation had thrust the United States into the international leadership in economic capability. But in factories as well as on farms, some people were beginning to question whether a system based on ever greater profits was the best way for Americans to create a world of peace and prosperity. Now, Mr. Cropper, you had mentioned something about, well, the amendments or the things that you would do to the Constitution, where I really think you would just turn us into a plutocracy because, hey, you just want to kind of throw us there without actually having the base understanding and actually hearing the voices of individuals that went through different crises. I wonder how Canada is. I really do wonder how England is now, and how the world will be. But, you know, I really only want to find input from people that are in the present, that have read the past, but they're in the present. They're not here trying to become an audio book author. Now, don't confuse me for you. I'm reading this for a point, and I think you get my point, and if you don't, plenty of other people do. A few voices continue, and I'm back to my book, or this book, Howard Zinn's book. And before I even can carry on there, here's light reading. Here's a good introductory intro to Howard Zinn. You can't be neutral on a moving train. It's his personal history. Now this really, he's turned on by this lady Aoife in New York, great lady. And here's his other book. This is an extension of this book, but just that photo. Look at those people. Each one of those dots, Mr. Cropper. Those are imbeciles. Those aren't humans. Those are subhuman imbeciles that are marching on Washington for some reason or another. For some reason or another, all these dots, these people that have the same CCs as you, that you and Ayn Rand and your group of love-ins, objectivist love-ins are accusing of being just scum. And, like you said, hey, an epoch and a thought can be blown away in a single sweep of the hand. Well, Ayn Rand is that epoch. You just don't know it yet. You don't know that you're caught in that little crevice, that little book crevice. Okay, but anyway, back to what I'm saying here. A few voices continued to insist that the real war was inside each nation. Dwight MacDonald's wartime magazine, Politics, presented in early 1945 an article by the French worker philosopher Simon Weil. And Simon says this. Simon says, whether the mask is labeled fascism, democracy, or dictatorship of the proletariat, our great adversary remains the apparatus, the bureaucracy, the police, and the military. Not the one facing us across the frontier or the battle lines, which is not so much our enemy as our brother's enemy, but the one that calls itself our protector and makes us its slaves. No matter what the circumstances, the worst betrayal will always be subordinate ourselves to the apparatus, and to trample underfoot in its service all human values in ourselves and in others. Now, I suggest that some of the things that have been mentioned in text are things that perhaps you should investigate, not as an objectivist and not as a subjectivist and not as an apologist, but as a human and as somebody that gives a fucking rat's fat ass, which you already claim that you don't. You don't give a shit. You give a lamb's two craps about these other human beings, which could sooner be your neighbors, your friends, some blood relative, or anybody else. And I think that you're a racist and a bigot, but it wouldn't matter if I did or didn't. And that's a whole different topic. It really is. It really is. And I'm not going to accuse you of that, but when you say you don't give a lamb's crap, these people are looking for plumbing, and you don't see the history of where plumbing came in and why the culture comes up, and you don't see where diversity is bends to monism. You don't see that you don't see that what capitalism and the fruits of its labors right now, what it's doing to worldwide diversity. You don't care about diversity. You don't think it's needed. You want to move into the future. And you know what? Hey, I don't know. I'm just throwing this out. Okay, here we go. I think this will be the second to last thing. The women who worked in the typical woman's job, secretary, receptionist, typist, salesperson, cleaning woman, nurse, were treated to the full range of humiliations that men in subordinate positions faced at work, plus another set of humiliations stemming from being a woman. Jibes at their mental processes, sexual jokes, and aggression. Invisibility except as sexual objects, cold demands for more efficiency. A commercial guide to clerical time standards printed a question and answer column. Question: I'm a businessman and my secretary seems to move entirely too slow. How many times a minute should she be able to open and close a file drawer? Answer: exactly 25 times. Times for other open and close operations are 0.04 minutes for opening or closing a folder and 0.026 minutes for opening and standard center desk drawer. If you're worried about her chair activity, clock her against these standards. got up from the chair at .033 minutes, turn and swivel in chair in .009 minutes. A woman factory worker in New Bedford, Massachusetts in the early 70s in a medium-sized corporation whose president dividends from the corporation in 1970 amounted to $325,000 wrote in an organizing newspaper that 90% of the workers in her department were women, but all of the supervisors